Commander Vex of the Galactic Council's First Contact Division stared at the holographic display with his 4 eyes blinking in asynchronous bewilderment. The small blue planet designated Sol 3 had finally achieved faster-than-light communication, triggering the automatic protocols for inclusion in the interstellar community. "Their biology makes no sense," muttered Science Officer Lyra, her tentacles twitching with agitation as she scrolled through the preliminary data. "They're carbon-based, but their endurance parameters exceed most silicon life forms, and they appear to operate on a sleep cycle where they become unconscious for approximately 1/3 of their planetary rotation." Vex's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "The unconsciousness part explains why they haven't been detected by our deep space probes. We assumed any intelligent species would maintain continuous awareness." "That's not even the strangest part," Lyra continued. "They're essentially bags of water reinforced with calcium structures, yet they've survived on a planet with such extreme temperature variations and gravity fluctuations that would crush most Class C species." The communication officer, a crystalline entity named Orb, chimed in with a melodic series of tones. "Their transmission patterns are chaotic. They appear to communicate through controlled air vibrations rather than telepathy or electromagnetic pulses like most evolved species." Vex had been preparing for this moment for over 200 cycles. The Galactic Council had strict protocols for introducing primitive species to the greater community. Most needed centuries of guidance before they could handle the psychological impact of not being alone in the universe. "What's their technological level?" Vex asked. "Inconsistent," replied Lyra. "They barely escaped their atmosphere using combustion technology, but they've also developed sophisticated quantum computation. Their weapons are primarily kinetic, extraordinarily primitive, yet they've somehow harnessed nuclear fission." "A dangerous combination," Vex noted. "What about their societal structure?" "Fractured, Orb harmonized. Multiple leadership entities divided by geographical boundaries. They still engage in territorial disputes using their primitive weapons." Vex sighed, a habit he picked up from studying other oxygen breathers. "Standard protocol suggests at least 50 cycles of observation before initiating direct contact." "Sir," interrupted Lyra, her voice quivering slightly, "there's something else. Their recorded history contains multiple extinction-level events that they've survived. Ice ages, supervolcanoes, massive asteroid impacts, and they're still here." Vex felt his exoskeleton tighten. "Natural resilience or technological intervention?" "Neither," said Lyra. "They just adapted, without genetic modification technology. They simply endured conditions that should have eradicated them." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Most species in the Council had evolved in stable environments with minimal threats. The few that came from harsh worlds had developed specific evolutionary advantages: armor plating, telepathy, hibernation cycles spanning centuries. "I'm modifying the protocol," Vex finally declared. "We'll establish communication immediately." "Sir," Orb's crystalline structure flickered with surprise. "That contradicts all first contact guidelines." "The guidelines were written for predictable species," Vex responded. "These humans have survived circumstances that would have ended most civilizations. If their history is accurate, they possess a resilience that defies conventional understanding." "What are you saying, Commander?" asked Lyra. Vex's 4 eyes focused intently on the blue planet spinning slowly on the display. "I'm saying that any species that can survive everything their planet has thrown at them and still achieve space travel might not respond to our protocols in expected ways. And frankly," he added with a note of concern, "I'd rather have them as allies than discover what they're truly capable of when threatened." The human delegation arrived at Outpost Epsilon exactly as scheduled, which surprised Vex. Based on their chaotic communication patterns, he had expected delays or confusion. Instead, the 5 representatives, diverse in coloration and physical dimensions, stepped from their surprisingly compact vessel with an air of confident curiosity. Ambassador Tom, the designated spokesperson, smiled as he extended a 5-digited appendage toward Vex. On behalf of Earth, we extend greetings and friendship. Vex hesitated, reviewing the briefing on human customs before carefully grasping the offered hand. The grip was firmer than expected, the skin temperature alarmingly high, nearly hot enough to damage Vex's sensitive outer membrane. "Welcome to Galactic Council territory," Vex replied. "We are pleased your species has achieved the technological threshold for inclusion." The human's facial features shifted in what the briefing identified as amusement. "Honestly, we're just glad we're not alone out here." The universe was getting pretty lonely. Lyra, monitoring the human's biological signatures, sent Vex a private communication. Their heart rates are elevated, but within their normal parameters. They're producing stress hormones, yet outwardly appear calm. Fascinating compartmentalization. The diplomatic conference room had been adjusted to Earth standard gravity and atmosphere composition, though the temperature was kept cooler than human preference as a compromise for the multiple species present. Vex noted with interest that while the council representatives from warmer worlds wore thermal regulation suits, the humans simply put on what they called sweaters and continued without complaint. "Your adaptation to discomfort is remarkable," noted Council Elder Zin, a gaseous entity contained within a hovering mechanical sphere. "Most species require precise environmental controls." "Oh, this isn't bad at all," replied Kate, the human environmental scientist. "I did research in Antarctica, where it got down to -70 degrees. Now that was cold." The statement triggered an alarmed murmur among the council representatives. Such temperatures would be instantly fatal to most species present. "You survived such conditions?" asked Zin, his containment sphere pulsing with disbelief. "With the right gear, sure," Kate shrugged. "Humans live in almost every environment on Earth. Deserts, tundra, mountains, even underwater in specialized habitats." Vex exchanged glances with Lyra. Their preliminary research hadn't fully conveyed the extent of human environmental adaptability. The diplomatic discussions proceeded smoothly until the topic of defense treaties arose. The Galactic Council traditionally offered protection to newly incorporated species, particularly from the void hegemony that occupied the neighboring galactic arm. "While we appreciate the offer," said Miguel, the human security expert, "we'd prefer a mutual defense arrangement rather than a protectorate status." Elder Zin's sphere darkened slightly. "Your species has barely achieved interstellar communication. The void hegemony possesses technology that could reduce your planet to base elements." Miguel nodded thoughtfully. "We understand the threat differential. However, humanity has a long history of overcoming technological disadvantages through unconventional approaches. You're suggesting your primitive species could resist a Tier 3 civilization." Zin's tone conveyed clear skepticism. "We're suggesting," Tom interjected diplomatically, "that humanity brings unique tactical perspectives that might complement your technological advantages." Vex, who had been studying human history in depth, found himself nodding in agreement. The council would be wise to consider their proposal. Human military history demonstrates remarkable resourcefulness against superior forces. Later, in private chambers, Elder Zin confronted Vex. "You're advocating for an unprecedented arrangement with an unproven species." "With respect, Elder," Vex replied, "I believe underestimating humans would be a significant tactical error. Their historical records show they're at their most innovative and dangerous when threatened." The Galactic Council's cultural exchange program had been designed to gradually introduce new species to the diversity of the universe over several decades. Humans, in their typical fashion, compressed the timeline dramatically. They've requested access to all cultural databases. Councillor Distra's membrane flushed with concern. "That's thousands of civilizations worth of information." "Yes," Vex confirmed, "and they've offered complete access to their own cultural archives in return. But their neural pathways can't possibly process that volume of information," protested Lyra. "Most species take years to acclimate to even one new civilization's cultural nuances." Vex examined the latest reports from the Human Information Exchange team. They've developed an algorithmic sorting system to categorize and prioritize the data. They're focusing first on sociological patterns, artistic expressions, and technological applications. And consumption patterns, added Ord with a musical chuckle. They seem particularly interested in everyone's food. The human delegation had expanded from the original 5 to nearly 50 specialists, each dedicated to understanding some aspect of galactic civilization. Their presence at Outpost Epsilon had created unexpected ripples throughout the station. Dr. Allen, the human medical researcher, had caused a minor sensation in the xenobiology department by volunteering tissue samples and demonstrating an alarming tendency towards self-experimentation. After accidentally exposing himself to a mild Centaurian neurotoxin, he had simply documented his symptoms while the alien medical staff panicked around him. Fascinating immune response, he commented while his left arm temporarily paralyzed. The paralytic effect seems to interact with our acetylcholine receptors, but my body's already producing antibodies. More concerning to the Council was how quickly humans built relationships with species that had traditionally remained isolated. The crystalline Lumerians, who had maintained diplomatic distance for millennia due to their extreme sensitivity, had somehow become enthusiastic collaborators with the human musicians who've discovered that specific vocal harmonies could create pleasing resonance patterns within Lumerian structures. They're adapting too quickly, Distra insisted during an emergency council session. No species has ever integrated at this pace. It disrupts the balance. Is it disruption or catalysis? Countered Vex. The Arcosian and Moravian delegations have been at diplomatic impasse for centuries, yet yesterday they reached agreement after that human diplomat, Jamie, introduced something called shovel diplomacy and confidence-building measures. And this doesn't concern you. Distra's membrane rippled with agitation. Humans have been in contact with the galactic community for less than one orbital cycle of their planet, yet they're already influencing interspecies relations that predate their civilization. Vex considered his response carefully. What concerns me, Counselor, is not their influence but our reaction to it. Humans thrive on exchange and adaptation. When they encounter something new, they don't just observe it. They engage with it, modify it, incorporate it, which is precisely the problem. Distra responded. They change things. The Council has maintained stability for thousands of cycles through careful managed evolution of interspecies relations. And perhaps, Vex suggested cautiously, that stability has calcified into stagnation in some areas. The debate continued into what humans would call the night cycle, but Vex had already made his decision. Rather than restricting human access to cultural information, he would recommend expansion. If humans were going to change the galactic community, and he was increasingly certain they would, better they did so with complete understanding. As he left the council chambers, he received an unexpected notification, an invitation from the human cultural attaché to something called a potluck dinner, where various species were encouraged to bring traditional food items for sharing. Such casual intermingling of different biological requirements and cultural taboos would have been unthinkable before humans arrived. Yet somehow, Vex found himself looking forward to it. The attack came without warning. 3 Void hegemony battlecruisers emerged from subspace less than a light minute from Outpost Epsilon, their weapon systems already charging. Standard Council protocols called for immediate evacuation of diplomatic personnel while defensive systems engage. Vex was halfway to the evacuation pods when he realized the humans weren't following protocol. Instead, they were moving against the flow of traffic, heading toward the command center. Ambassador Tom. Vex called over the blaring alarms. Your delegation must evacuate immediately. This outpost cannot withstand a direct void assault. Tom's face showed an expression Vex had learned to recognize as determined focus. Commander, we need access to your communications and sensor arrays. This is not the time for data collection, Vex insisted, his mandibles clicking with stress. It's not for research, replied Miguel. the security expert who had appeared beside Tom. "We have experience with asymmetric warfare that might be useful, but we need to understand the tactical situation." Against his better judgment, Vex diverted from the evacuation route and led the humans to the secondary command center. The primary had already been hit, its systems offline. "The hegemony is jamming standard communication frequencies," reported Lyra, who had taken charge of the remaining staff. "Defensive shields are at 32% and failing. Estimated time to complete failure is 12 minutes. "What about the subspace bubbles?" asked Kate, studying the technical readouts with surprising comprehension. "The what?" Vex asked. "These energy patterns here," Kate pointed to fluctuations in the sensor readings. "They're creating localized subspace distortions to enhance their weapon impacts, but the distortions have their own frequency pattern." Dr. Allen, who had been examining the engineering schematics, looked up suddenly. "Could we reverse the polarity of the station's gravitational stabilizers to create a counter-resonance?" Lyra's tentacles waved in dismissal. "Theoretically, yes, but it would require reconfiguring the entire power distribution system manually. The automation is offline from the first attack." "Show us where," said Miguel simply. What followed was a chaotic implementation of what the humans called jury-rigging. While council engineers would have methodically analyzed each system modification, the humans made rapid, intuitive adjustments, rerouting power systems and repurposing non-essential equipment with alarming disregard for standard safety protocols. "This is madness," muttered Lyra as she watched Alan splice control circuits using a medical laser. "Even if it works, the feedback could destabilize the station's core." "Sometimes you have to risk the station to save the station," Tom replied with a grim smile. "Miguel, are the modifications ready on your end?" "Ready enough," came the reply through a hastily configured communicator. "Kate's team has recalibrated the gravitational systems to your specifications." "On my mark, then," Tom said, nodding to Vex. 3, 2, 1. The outpost shuddered as the gravitational stabilizers reversed, creating a subspace ripple that expanded outward. On the sensor displays, the energy signatures of the void weapons flickered and distorted as their carefully calibrated subspace bubbles collapsed. "It's working," exclaimed Lyra. "Their weapon efficiency has dropped by 60%. More importantly," Vex noted, pointing to another display, "they've halted their advance. They're recalibrating." "Which gives us about 3 minutes before they adapt," Tom said. "Enough time to implement Phase 2. "There's a Phase 2. Vex asked, suddenly reminded that he had allowed these unpredictable aliens to take virtual control of his outpost. "There's always a Phase 2, Tom replied with that unsettling human expression. A smile that didn't indicate amusement, but rather anticipation of challenge. "We didn't just disrupt their weapons. While they're focused on that, we're broadcasting their exact positions on all frequencies." Vex's exoskeleton tightened in alarm. "You've exposed our communication systems. The void will trace the signal directly to us." "That's counting on them looking at us," Miguel said as he rejoined them. His clothing singed from electrical burns he seemed to be ignoring. "But we're betting they'll be more concerned about the Council battle fleet that just received their exact coordinates." 3 solar cycles after what was now being called the Epsilon incident, Vex found himself in an unprecedented position, addressing the full Galactic Council with a human delegation at his side. The Council chamber, a vast amphitheater designed to accommodate representatives from over 2,000 member species, hummed with tense anticipation. "The facts are clear," Vex stated, his voice projected throughout the chamber. "Without human intervention, Outpost Epsilon would have been destroyed, resulting in the loss of 17 council representatives and over 800 diplomatic and scientific personnel." "No one disputes the outcome, Commander," responded High Counselor Drix, the ancient mollusk-like being who had led the council for over 300 cycles. "What concerns this body is how a newly contacted species with minimal technological advancement was able to counter void hegemony tactics that have confounded our best strategists for decades. All eyes turned to Tom, who stood calmly beside Vex. The human had insisted on wearing traditional Earth formal attire rather than the environment suit recommended for his species, another example of humanity's inexplicable comfort with discomfort. Counselor, with respect, you're thinking about technological advancement as a linear progression, Tom explained. Earth's history took a different path. While your civilizations developed in relatively stable environments with consistent threats, humanity evolved through periods of extreme volatility. Dr. Allen stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed Earth's turbulent history, ice ages, continental shifts, massive extinction events. Each of these catastrophes, Allen continued, required adaptation or extinction. But more significantly, our greatest pressures came from competing with ourselves. The display shifted to show human warfare through the ages, each technological innovation rapidly countered, leading to escalation and further innovation. What you call asymmetric warfare, we call Tuesday, Miguel added with a grim smile that Vex had learned indicated human gallows humor. For most of our history, someone was always outgunned, outmanned, or technologically disadvantaged. Those who survived developed strategies that didn't rely on technological superiority. Kate stepped forward next. When we encountered the void weapons, we recognized the pattern immediately, not the technology, but the strategic approach. They rely on superior technology applied with predictable methodology. And predictability, Tom concluded, is a vulnerability in itself. The council chamber erupted in overlapping vocalizations, electromagnetic pulses, and pheromone releases as representatives debated the implications. Vex noted with interest that the division wasn't between pro-human and anti-human factions as he'd expected, but between those who recognized the strategic paradigm shift and those who rejected it. High Counselor Zrix raised a tentacle for silence. Ambassador Tom, your species has demonstrated remarkable capabilities under pressure. However, there is concern about humanity's historical tendency toward conflict. The Council has maintained galactic peace for millennia by mediating disputes before they escalate to warfare. Tom nodded thoughtfully. Counselor, humanity's history is indeed marked by conflict, but also by our ability to form alliances, build coalitions, and eventually establish international laws and norms. We understand better than most the cost of warfare because we've paid it so often. Furthermore, added Dr. Allen, our research into Council historical archives suggests that the extended period of peace may have created a strategic vulnerability. The void hegemony has been testing boundaries and expanding territory for centuries, while the Council responds with diplomatic protests and minimal defensive actions. Vex tensed, expecting the Council to react negatively to such direct criticism. Instead, several of the elder representatives indicated agreement through their species-specific gestures. The humans speak an uncomfortable truth, acknowledged Counselor Distra, who had been among the most skeptical of human integration. Our diplomatic successes with reasonable species may have left us ill-equipped to deal with the hegemony, which respects only strength. What are you proposing? Asked Zrix. A joint security initiative, Tom replied, combining Council technology with human strategic approaches, not to provoke conflict, but to create a deterrent that even the void will recognize. And if deterrence fails, Zrix pressed. Tom met the ancient counselor's compound gaze steadily. Then humanity stands ready to help defend our new allies. After all, we've only just found our place in the universe. We don't intend to lose it. The strategic planning facility orbiting Jupiter's moon Europa had been constructed in record time, a fusion of Council technology and human engineering that exemplified the rapidly evolving partnership. Inside the central command hub, holographic displays showed the current positions of Council and Void hegemony forces across 3 sectors. The hegemony has altered their patrol patterns, noted Admiral Jack, recently promoted to coordinate human forces with the Council fleet. They're consolidating around their core systems rather than pushing outward as they have been for the past century. Defensive posture, agreed Vex, who had been assigned as the Council's primary liaison. They're uncertain after Epsilon and unwilling to risk further encounters until they've assessed our capabilities. Creating breathing room for Operation Unexpected, Tom said with satisfaction. Phase 1 is already showing results. Operation Unexpected, named by humans with their peculiar fondness for descriptive designations, represented a fundamental shift in the Council's approach to the Void threat. Rather than the passive containment strategy they had employed for generations, the operation called for proactive measures to destabilize hegemony expansion without direct military confrontation. Phase 2 implementation begins tomorrow, reported Kate, now heading the Environmental Sciences Division. She manipulated the holographic display to show the 12 uninhabited star systems along the hegemony border. We've completed the survey of all target systems and confirmed they're suitable for the terraforming initiative. I still question the resource allocation, said Councillor Distra, who had joined the project as the Council's oversight representative. Terraforming 12 systems simultaneously stretches our technical capabilities to their limit, which is precisely why the hegemony won't expect it, Admiral Jack replied. They've based their strategy on your traditional response patterns. A massive terraforming initiative that creates viable colonies along their entire expansion corridor doesn't fit those patterns. The door to the command hub slid open, admitting Dr. Allen and his research team, an eclectic mix of humans and council scientists who had been working on what they called the contingency option. We've successfully tested the subspace resonance disruptors, Allen reported, his eyes bright with the excitement Vex had come to recognize as the human response to technological breakthroughs. Small scale, of course, but the results match our theoretical models. Meaning? Prompted Distra. Meaning we can neutralize their subspace weapon advantage without direct confrontation, Allen explained. The disruptors create a field effect that destabilizes their bubble technology without appearing as a conventional weapon. From their perspective, it will seem like equipment failure. Tom nodded with approval. Excellent. Deploy the prototypes to the forward council outposts as a precaution. But remember, our goal isn't to provoke conflict. Yet we prepare for it nonetheless, observed Distra, her membrane shifting to indicate concern. We prepare, Tom corrected gently, to make conflict so undesirable that it never occurs. The Void understands strength, not reason. We must speak a language they comprehend. One standard galactic year after first contact, the Void hegemony sent an unexpected communication to the Galactic Council, a request for diplomatic talks. The message arrived during the inaugural celebration of New Terra, the first of 12 terraformed worlds established along what had once been the unchallenged expansion corridor of the hegemony. They want to negotiate, announced High Councillor Zrix to the assembled dignitaries in New Terra's central plaza. After centuries of aggression and territorial seizure, the Void hegemony seeks diplomatic resolution. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Cautious optimism from council representatives, who had always preferred dialogue to confrontation, skepticism from the human contingent who had studied the hegemony's historical pattern of false diplomatic overtures. They're testing us, Tom suggested during the emergency strategy session that followed, trying to assess whether our new approach is a temporary anomaly or a permanent shift in council policy. Nevertheless, countered Distra, we must explore the possibility of genuine change. The council was founded on principles of peaceful coexistence. Agreed, said Admiral Jack, but peace from a position of strength is different from peace through acquiescence. The diplomatic channel is worth pursuing, but Operation Unexpected continues at full capacity. The diplomatic exchange was scheduled at a neutral location, a deep space station at the midpoint between Council and Hegemony territory. The Council delegation, led by Zrix, but heavily influenced by human strategic advisors, arrived to find the Void representatives already present. It was the first time any human had seen a Void entity in person. Their appearance, vaguely humanoid but with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light, was less unsettling than their demeanor. They moved with precise, calculated gestures that suggested everything was measured, and nothing spontaneous. "You alter the equation," stated the Void Prime representative, addressing Tom directly rather than Drix, a calculated insult that everyone recognized but no one acknowledged. Humans. Unknown variable. Unpredictable responses. Disruption of established patterns. "We prefer to think of it as introducing new perspectives," Tom replied diplomatically. "Perspective irrelevant. Outcomes significant." The Void representative's speech pattern lacked the nuanced inflections of most sentient species. 12 new worlds. Inhabited. Defended. Expansion corridor blocked. The Council has always maintained those systems were not available for unilateral appropriation, Drix stated firmly. Words without consequence, the Void representative responded dismissively. Now, consequences without confrontation. Inefficient use of resources to challenge. New strategic calculation required. The negotiations proceeded for 3 full cycles, covering territorial boundaries, technology exchange protocols, and security guarantees. Throughout the process, Vex observed the careful dance between Council diplomacy, human strategic positioning, and Void calculation. "We call it innovation," Tom replied. "The freedom to explore possibilities rather than follow established patterns. Dangerous, unpredictable, effective." The Void representative's black eyes revealed nothing. Question: would humans have attacked hegemony directly if Epsilon destroyed? Tom considered the question carefully before answering. "We would have explored all diplomatic options first, but if those failed, history suggests we would not have rested until we found a way to respond. As calculated, humans, acceptable losses individually, unacceptable risk collectively." The Void entity made a gesture that might have been acknowledgement. Hegemony adapts, recalculates, finds new expansion direction away from human influence. After the Void delegation departed, the Council representatives gathered for a final assessment. "They fear you," Distra told the human delegation bluntly. "Not your technology or your numbers, but your unpredictability." "Not just us," Tom corrected, looking around at the diverse assembly of Council representatives who had worked alongside humanity over the past year. "They fear what we've created together. A galactic council that combines your advanced technology and accumulated wisdom with human adaptability and strategic innovation." Vex, listening to the exchange, realized the fundamental shift that had occurred. Before humans, the Council had maintained a static equilibrium, responding to threats with well-established protocols. Humanity had introduced not just new tactics but a new paradigm, one of constant evolution and adaptation. Later, as the celebration of the diplomatic breakthrough continued, Vex found Tom standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars.